Hello everybody, it's CatGamerOP, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to overclock your GPU, and especially NVIDIA 30 series GPUs. So to get started, we just need to download this folder. Link will be in the description to this Google Drive link. This is basically everything we need for the overclock. Let's go through some of the applications. First one is GPU. It's basically a utility to get some info about your GPU, and yeah, it can be pretty handy sometimes, like sensors tab. But yeah, nothing really much about it. And you can also like check your memory type, the memory chips your GPU has. Yeah. Next one is hardware info. A really useful program to check everything hardware related on your computer, from CPU to network to disk performance. What we are gonna be looking at here is the memory junction temperature, and yeah, basically that's it that we need it for, and like some general stats, maybe power draw, etc. Then MSI Kombustor, we'll be using that to stress test the overclock. MSI Afterburner, this will be used to overclock our GPU. Actually, you can use software from EVGA and other manufacturers, but I think MSI Afterburner is the easiest way to go, basically. And then qBittorrent and Unigine Superposition Benchmark. So we just install qBittorrent and you can download it quickly from torrent. Right, and it looks like that. We're gonna be using some settings here. Yeah. So first things first, what you want to do is install all the programs. That's first step. And then before we're gonna start overclocking, actually we need to do some settings in the control panel. So you need to open the NVIDIA control panel. Go to adjust image settings with preview. Set this to performance, and then go back to use the advanced 3D image settings, right? Then we're not going to touch anything here yet. Physics, set it to your GPU, and then everything is unneeded. What I actually want to do now is do some NVIDIA driver tweaks. So it like runs at full speed all the time. The core clock, it doesn't like go down while the GPU is idle, which helps slightly with latency. And yeah, just disable some basic telemetry and whatnot, and import an NVIDIA profile. So basically we just like run everything here, run these two. So the first one is to set the true monitor scaling. It will not work if your monitor doesn't have a scaler though, so yeah. Then we're gonna force P0 state. So what it does is we're basically gonna make our GPU run at P0, and P0 is the max frequency state when GPU is like fully operational. So our like GPU will never drop down the clocks when it's idle or when it's gaming, right? Then no error code correction. Yeah, the name says it all about itself. It might say that ECC features are not supported for GPU, but it kind of just moves along with it, right? Then unrestricted clock policy, so we can increase core clocks even further. Yeah, it was like a setting in NVIDIA Power Miser to like do the unrestricted clock policy, and now it's just like here in the patch file. Okay. Then basically NVIDIA telemetry, delete some of the files in the NVIDIA folders, and then if you have a driver of 45730 or below, you should use this. This will unhide silk smoothness option in your settings. If you run something like 472.12, right, or like me 466.77, it actually does not work. They just removed it completely, right? Then some more keywords. You can do disable login and disable preemption. So this disables basic login into the event log, and preemption kinda helps with latency just a little bit. Actually, you should test this one if it's like better or worse, right? Then if you use GeForce Experience, don't use this one because it will basically disable shadow play. But if you don't have shadow play or you don't clip, you can use this. This basically disables content protection for your display. Yeah, that's about it here. And then what we want to do is actually import a profile. So the profile basically does some settings for us. So we get like more frames with the like driver settings, turn off VSync, blah blah blah, right? So you should be good with using only these two, get with hidden for 457.30 and below, and above, basically, right? So I have 466.77, so I'm just gonna check it in. It's gonna say profile successfully imported. Click apply changes a couple of times, and then we can go back to NVIDIA control panel. Then what we want to do is enable low latency mode, set our OpenGL rendering GPU to our primary GPU basically, and preferred refresh rate highest available. If your monitor has a G-Sync, you should set the mode to like fixed refresh rate, not G-Sync, and vertical sync to off. So now we're good basically. Now we can start actually overclocking. So after you applied all the changes, you should restart the computer, and when you open the MSI Afterburner, you should be seeing something like this. So your core clock and your memory clock will be locked at your basic gaming frequency, right? And before it used to be like 200 on core and like 500 on memory or something like that. Now it's 1830 on core and 9801 on memory. So that means it worked. And some of you noticed that I have a really weird overclock. Plus 50 on core and 300 in memory. If you see that or something like that, that means the overclock is probably not good, because basically what we're gonna do in this guide, we're gonna lock our voltage and then adjust the core frequency, so we kinda can avoid core thermal throttling when your GPU will be like in full use, right? And what this plus 50 does is basically it just sets all the curve to like plus 50. It makes it like just 50, all the points, all the like voltages to plus 50. And yeah, it's not what we want. Actually, a stable locked voltage, so it doesn't fluctuate, and a stable locked frequency. So we're just gonna set those to auto, right? 0. Okay. So to start with, MSI Afterburner, let's go to settings. You can basically copy all these ones. You need to unlock voltage control, set it to third party, unlock voltage monitoring, force constant voltage, never check for product updates, and if you're on AMD, you should disable ultra low power state mode. Yeah. Then we're gonna go to user interface. Skin transparency, we're gonna set it to maximum. And then we're gonna change the skin to MSI Afterburner. So just battery, basically. And then it's gonna ask us to restart the program or restart. And after that, we can go to monitoring. And we should be able to see GPU voltage. And you need to click the check mark here and click apply. So yeah, everything with the MSI Afterburner is set up. Now we're gonna set up a custom RAM profile. For my 3070 Ti, I basically have it like this. So it's not that loud. And what this use firmware control mode allows me to do is basically I can close MSI Afterburner and my fan curve will still stick. Though it only works on 30 series GPUs. If you have like 2070, 2080, like this will not work. The fan curve will not stick. So you actually need to have like MSI Afterburner in the background for the fan curve. It's 100 when it's like 70 and 40 when it's 50. And then I have override 0 fan speed curve with hardware curve and force fan speed update on each period. That would still kinda, this override 0 fan speed is kinda a meme because it still goes to like 0 RPM. Yeah, so that's basically it. And now what we want to do is actually go to the main tab and do some simple settings, I guess. We're just gonna max the power limit and temperature limit. We're not gonna touch core voltage because, as I've said, we're gonna set a locked voltage and a locked frequency. So increasing this slider will do nothing for us. So just leave it at 0. And first thing that we're gonna overclock here is memory. Why memory? Well, basically because if you start doing core clock first and you like find a stable voltage and stable frequency where you don't crash and your GPU doesn't get too hot, you might then start increasing memory, and then you'll start noticing that suddenly your GPU score is worse and worse just because it's like more stress into memory, and now everything is kind of unstable, right? So especially this is true for 30 series because of the new memory GDDR6X, and it is really hot. Sometimes it's very, very hot. The memory junction on some chips on some GPUs can reach to 100, and then you'll start thermal throttling and everything will be really, really unfortunate. But for my 3070 Ti, the memory temperature is actually alright. It doesn't get too hot, unlike there was like a 3090 Supreme that was overclocking, and it was like 80 on desktop. The memory junction was 80 on desktop with like 100 watts of power draw. To avoid that, you basically have to open your PC side panel so your GPU gets more fresh air. That's the easiest thing to do, right? Then B, we already have set up the fan curve. That helps a little bit, though it's mostly for the core temperature, but it also helps memory, right? And C, if you are really going like really far, you can replace the memory pads, the memory terminal pads there, but it requires some skill, and if you're not ready to do that, just like should skip it, unless you're like memory junction like 100 on desktop and you have nothing and you cannot do anything with it. Yeah, then maybe you should start thinking about replacing the GPU or doing some upgrades to it. So yeah, to start overclocking, we're basically gonna drop down the voltage so we don't have a drop in our core frequency when we're gonna be running the test. And yeah, we're gonna benchmark the standard, the default memory clock. Then we're gonna go above, and above and see where it like tops out. Then we're gonna stress test it, see if it's good. If it's good, maybe we can push slightly further. If not, then unlucky. Also, the thing with the 30 series GPUs, they have like error code correction on memory. So before, on 20 series, on 10 series GPUs, when your memory clock was unstable and it was like too high, your entire system would just freeze, or you'll like start getting really weird artifacts. But with 30 series, it's a little bit more complicated. You'll not crash, but you'll start getting like way worse performance. And you might not crash, but like it will stutter, and yeah, it might eventually crash you, but in a way longer period than it would do on like 20 series, for example. So we have to be careful with that. Anyway, how to lock the core voltage. So we have to click on the graph here. Then we're gonna select our desired voltage we wanna lock the GPU at. I'm just gonna do 900, and then to lock the frequency and voltage, you just press L. And then you have the yellow line, which symbolizes that we have locked it. Then we're just gonna click apply, and then you have it. We have 900 millivolts on voltage and 1755 on core. So next, our step is to benchmark the GPU in Superposition, and we're also gonna have Afterburner open for the basically monitoring the GPU temperature, the core clock, and everything. So we're opening Superposition, and here we have VRAM setting. So we basically have to use the maximum of our VRAM to like stress test and to benchmark. So we know if it like isn't stable in the benchmark, it's going to be 100% unstable in the stress test. So 8K optimized pretty much does it. 6K out of 8K, which is not bad. There's still 2K left. If you do like some custom, right, it's not gonna do anything. It's already on fullest settings. Maybe like that. The load's a little bit more of our VRAM. Graphics API DirectX is fine. And then we're gonna go to settings and turn off sound and music and turn off tooltips because we don't need them, and turn off DPI scaling. Yeah, so now we're gonna basically do a benchmark, and then it will give us the result, and we're gonna basically screenshot the result, and we're gonna start doing more and more of memory clock. Okay, there we have our result. Just finished the stress test, and what we can see here is that our GPU reached only 60 Celsius. This is really important because if you set a rather high voltage and your GPU is like 80 or 90 degrees, it drops a lot of core clock. Like the core clock dropping starts at 50 degrees, the first one, then 60, 70, 80, and like that. Yeah, now it dropped slightly the clock because our GPU is idle right now. Anyway, yeah, our first result. Temperature is looking fine. Memory fine. Power fine. We have stable voltage that does not go anywhere. If your voltage went down, that means you also have to lower it on the graph. So yeah, this is our first result. Now we're gonna start increasing the memory clock a little bit. Let's start with the 500. On GDDR6X, the frequency can go really high of the memory, but again, you have to be aware of the error code correction and stuff like that. And for example, if this was my 1660, 500 is the absolute max you can get on memory. Above 500, it would crash. On like 600, it would like just freeze the game. And when your GPU crashes, I had like this weird, not like a bug, but just a crash. Basically everything freezes on your computer, but you can still hear the sound. Your game freezes, your mouse isn't responsive, not keyboard, but you can hear the sound. So that's how you know your GPU is unstable. Right, so we increased it by 500. You can try starting with the 300 first, and then keep adding it up, like 500 plus 300, so we have 800, then maybe plus 200 if it's stable. If you didn't crash, if your score keeps going higher and higher, right? And then you'll find the top of what your memory can achieve, basically. Okay, let's test how we do with the memory clock plus 500. Okay, so there we have our another test of plus 500 on memory. Just gonna quickly save it. It's 500. Let's compare those. Oh, 500. And then stock. Okay. The score is roughly 90 points higher, which is good. Which is very good. Yeah, we can see that our average FPS is slightly higher, max is higher, and minimum is also higher. That's great. That's great. So yeah, we're gonna try another time. So we're gonna try, I guess, if I was doing it and I didn't know the limits of my GPU, I would do plus 300 again. So we have 800. We're gonna click apply and test again. Okay, so there we have it. Our score increased again, a little bit more. Again, we're checking min FPS is higher, average is higher, max is higher. That's great. Yeah, so right now we have the memory at plus 800, and then we keep going. Maybe add plus 200, 200. Like when it's 800, it's already close to the limit, let's say. Yeah, and you might start getting crashes if you, like, let's say do plus 300 on like 20 series, for example, right? But as I've said, with the GDDR6X, you can go pretty far, right? So I would do plus 200 again if I was new to this, and if I overclocked the first time, then plus 200, checked the score, checked everything, if it was all good. I kept going, right? Until then, either my score decreased, or it just basically wouldn't run the benchmark. It would like blue screen or crash immediately. Yeah. Also, just wanted to say that this overclock is not for mining crypto, because in crypto there's like a huge stress on your memory, so you have to kind of lower it really down, and you have to also like lower the voltage, because core clock doesn't really matter, and in gaming, in actual games, core clock matters a lot, as well as memory. Yeah, so now I'm gonna show you guys the example of what happens when it's basically does not crash, but the memory error code correction kicks in, and we just have a very bad score. So we're just gonna do plus 2000. That's basically pretty much the limit at this point. MSI Afterburner allows us to do. If we were to flash our V-bias on the GPU, we probably could go further, but we're not gonna do this in this video because it kind of voids the warranty, and I wouldn't advise this to users who are not feeling confident, or they're just afraid to mess something up, right? So we're gonna click apply, then we're gonna see 11500. So when on the official website or official text spec, we have only 19 gigabits effective. So by default, it's 9500 megahertz. And it's correct. Why is that? Because we have double data rate, and to get our actual speed, or like mega transfers per second, we should say, we have to multiply it by 2. So if we multiply 9500 by 2, we actually get 19 gigabits per second. So yeah, with what I'm gonna do now, we're just gonna crank it to 2000, and now we're gonna have 23 gigabits effective, right? And this is unstable, right? Because it's like legit the maximum value in MSI Afterburner. But not only that, we're gonna see how it does in the test, and basically just we're gonna see that the result is way worse than even our stock memory configuration. So there we have it, a score of 3300 basically. And if we take a look at our stock, we're gonna see that it's way worse. It is way worse. So this means it's unstable, and we're probably gonna crash in game, or we're just gonna have horrible FPS, right? So then I found out the sweet spot basically for my memory. It's 1500. Some might say it's a little bit over the head, right? Because I basically went from 19 gigabits per second to 22 gigabits per second, which is not bad actually. It's a really decent overclock. I don't think if that many cards can achieve that. But anyway, while increasing the memory clock, we also have to keep in mind that with the memory clock, we also increase our memory junction temperature. And if you have a second monitor, ideally you should monitor the memory junction temperature on your second monitor so it doesn't get like to 110. Well, you get me, right? So now we're actually gonna stress test our memory clock even further, so we know we like don't crash and will not have any kind of blue screens or whatever. And yeah, so here we have another score when we have plus 1500. Yeah, one important notice is that you actually have to disable motion blur, because motion blur eats a lot of FPS. Anyway, right now we're gonna stress test our memory clock. And for memory stress test, we're gonna be using a program called OCCT. I didn't add it here, but it will be added on the Google Drive. So it's also a little handy program that you can do various stress tests and validation of your benchmarks if you buy pro version, but we don't need that. So yeah, we can go into settings and just change everything like that. No checking for updates, no benchmark upload, stop on error, and yeah, basically that's it. Then we want to go into test. We want to go to VRAM, and we're gonna basically max out the memory usage percentage, and then we can just click start. We can also pull up the hardware monitor to check our memory junction temperatures so they're not too high. And yeah, and we should like wait around 15 minutes for the stress test to be completed. If you want, you can wait more. But yeah, when there will be an error, the test will be stopped. Though keep in mind we still have error code correction, and even if this test is fine, there's slight chance you can crash in game. But yeah, you can also, like, we're gonna do the core frequency. We're gonna stress test the core in a stress test app, and then we're gonna basically see how it does in game, right? What I also wanted to say is that we're not gonna be stress testing core in, let's say, firmware. Why, you might want to ask? Is that because firmware is like very, very heavy, and what it does is basically it will load your GPU like 100%. I don't know if you can consider it more than 100. Basically, what will happen, your GPU voltage will drop significantly and your core frequency will drop significantly because of the load, and we're not going to be able to test our overclock, right? Because we're going to do something like, let's say, like 1 volt and 2000 megahertz on core, right? And when we're going to be running firmware, it would be like 0.8 volts, right? And like 1600 megahertz on core. So it's just like useless in our case. But you can use firmware to test just like the GPU if you're like buying a new GPU and you don't know if it's good or not, if it like can actually run, if it doesn't like blue screen the computer in its stock configuration, if its cooling capacity is okay. But as I've said, your GPU will get really hot because it's like a really heavy stress test. Anyway, I'll be back when the 15 minutes pass. And there we have it. Basically 15 minutes, and our maximum memory junction temperature is 66 Celsius, which is perfectly fine. Yeah, then we can start overclocking the core. And there we have it. Basically 15 minutes, and our maximum memory junction temperature is 66 Celsius, which is perfectly fine. Yeah, then we can start overclocking the core.
One eternity later.
Anyway, so here we are overclocking the GPU core exactly, or maybe a little bit more than 1 month later. So gonna be taking a look at some screenshots of another memory and core overclock on the 2080 Ti that I've done yesterday. Then we're gonna be taking a look at my GPU overclock. So here's just like the default score at 1000 millivolts, right? Settings, gonna say again, motion blur has to be disabled. It's kind of dropping a lot of FPS, and usually DirectX gives you higher score, or at least it did on this GPU, than OpenGL by like 5 FPS, which was crazy, but we're just gonna be sticking to benchmarking on OpenGL here. Right, so first score, nothing much. Then we start increasing the memory frequency, plus 200, not bad. Then 900, also good. 1000, also fine, not bad. Right. This is where the voltage is a little bit more, right? So you kind of not look at it, but whatever. Right, and yes, now I stop overclocking. Yeah, I stop overclocking the memory, overclocking the core with the same 1025 millivolts. Did plus 50. I think it was already like plus 40 before. So it's like literally the stock score or the stock settings for core. Then yeah, this is basically with 1025 millivolts, and here we have 1000 millivolts, and we can see that the score is actually 100 more. And why that happens is actually very interesting, because we're a little bit getting thermal throttled at like 79 Celsius, but that's not the case, right? So the reason why we got 100 more points is actually because of the power limit. So every GPU, every V bias has a power limit and temperature limit, obviously. So yeah, the lower, basically manufacturers have some tiers, right? For GPUs, like MSI has their Mantis series, which is like the worst. Then goes Gaming X Trio, and then goes Supreme X, right? I've heard that Supreme X and Gaming Trio have the same PCB design, or almost very similar, but Supreme X has more power limit, which lets it basically overclock higher with higher voltage. So yeah, basically you have to find a sweet spot between your voltage and your core frequency, so it is stable and you're kind of riding at the top of the power limit when it would not drop the frequency, because you're literally dulled by power, right? And where you would still like utilize fully your core and like have it to the max, right? It's actually kind of funny thing with the core frequency, right? Because you can set it like to, for example, on my GPU, if I set like 15 points higher, it like instantly crashes. And 15 points lower, 15 megahertz lower is like perfectly fine, and it like passes all the benchmarks. So yeah, one way to avoid power limit is basically to flash your bias, but we're not going to be doing that in this video, because it's not like that much dangerous. It's just my 3070 Ti from MSI has a different V bias than, for example, the Asus ROG Strix OC edition, right? So I cannot flash it. But if you want, you can try flashing your bias, which is, of course, you do at your own risk. But that's one way how you can increase the voltage and increase your score without being like power limited, so your frequency goes down and your score goes down as well. So yeah, now basically you see how again I increased the frequency. Now it's at 2000, but the score is only 20 points higher. That's, again, we're right in the power limit and we cannot do anything else at 1000 millivolts. So then I decrease it by 20. And to slightly higher frequency than here. And again, we're gaining like 100 points more. Now we're gaining less power limited. And now our limit is basically how far we can push the CPU or GPU core. Here, again, a little bit more of the core. And this is the final result. So I actually had to drop down memory frequency by 200 and drop down a little bit on the core clock, right? So it's kind of interesting, right? Because here I told you to benchmark your memory overclock with OCCT memory built-in stress test, right? The VRAM for GPU. But even though I'm recording, we're gonna start. I'm just gonna show you why you should not do it, because it's okay-ish, but not ideal. Oh, I stripped the driver, that's why. Okay, so the reason why is that it basically does not load the VRAM fully. It loads it like to 85%. It loads it till 85%, and it does not go above. So what you should do, what you're actually going to be using to stress test our GPU is MSI Kombustor. The settings are pretty simple here, and we have an update. So resolution, set it to full HD. Full HD will load your GPU more than enough. You can also use the presets, but they're like kind of for benchmark, so Enable full screen. Display OSI basically means you're gonna be getting all the stats from your GPU, and if you just want to scan for artifacts without any stats, you can just stick artifact scanner, right? So yeah, on 2080 Ti, this one, I run it and I see that there are like lots of artifacts. So I decided to drop down the curve first. It didn't do anything, and it was still giving errors. So then I basically set the core clock to 0 and was still getting errors, and that's why I had to lower the memory frequency from 1000 to 800. And then I also had to lower core clock a little bit until it wasn't giving errors, right? I would say testing for 20 minutes and MSI Kombustor is more than enough, and should basically find all of your instability issues by that time. But yeah. Now we're gonna be talking a little bit of my GPU overclock, right? It used to be like this: 1050 millivolts, 2130. But again, it was already in the thermal limit, so I actually retested it yesterday after I overclocked at 2080 Ti, and now I'm using this. Basically the same settings, same core clock, but 40 millivolts lower. And in MSI Kombustor, it gives you like 5 FPS plus, because now you're not being power limited. Yeah, what else? Memory clock is way higher than 2080 Ti, yet again because 3070 Ti has GDDR6X memory chips, and they can overclock really high with memory. So yeah, core voltage, I've said before that it's kind of useless, right? But maybe if you have like unlocked bias, you can go to like 1.1 millivolts. If you do here, I do like +7. It like applies. Now we have 1.1, right? And if I didn't have it, it would only let me go to 1050. Reset. Okay. I would do the same. 2 plus whatever. Apply. Or it's going to be stuck at what the default bias setting is, which is 1062. Or it didn't. It actually didn't apply at all. But if I go to 1050, it should be applied. Bang bang. Yeah. So it's kind of useful if you have unlocked power limit, but if you don't have a power limit unlocked, then it's kind of useless because you're gonna be underclocking or undervolting the GPU core anyway. So it's useless. Yeah. You might say that, for example, this and let's say this overclock and this are basically the same frequency with 1050 millivolts voltage is the same for games like Valorant or other games that are not heavy on GPU, because basically you're never gonna be reaching thermal limit or power limit, so your FPS should be the same there. But if you're playing AAA titles, the voltage will matter. And basically having lower voltage is always better for the GPU lifespan. So yeah. Well, another thing I forgot to mention, that basically the limits of the memory overclocks and core overclocks is different on every GPU, right? Because, you know, different versions of the GPU, right? Some of them have better PCB, have better components. Some of them are slightly pre-overclocked, right? Like Asus ROG Strix OC edition. But basically, as I've said, you can push memory on GDDR6X up to like 1000 and higher. On GDDR6 it's around like 800 the limit, 1000. GDDR5 is it's like around 500, 600, I guess. Core clock depends on silicon, very high, and you can get good numbers with it. Depends on your silicon and again the quality of your PCB, whatever. Also, you know, if you're not being thermal limited, that's also a thing, because as I've said, or yeah, basically the first down clock happens at around 50 Celsius, then 60, and you're losing like those core megahertz by 10, 15, and basically that's where I meant, like this curve on the fan that always applies when I open MSI Afterburner. So it just doesn't reach 60. My GPU doesn't reach like 60 in game, even though right now it's 46, but we're recording and stuff. So that's fine. So basically now it drops the core frequency. Right. Here I have 200 on my 1660. I also have 2100 on core with only 1 volts voltage, so pretty much ideal to 3070 Ti. At 1 volt I have 2100, but on memory I only have 500, because if you set it to 600 it starts instant crashing, right? You also have to remember that on 30 series you have error code correction, and you need to check if your scores don't get lower, because it will not crash. It will just be correcting all the errors, thus your score will be all lower. Okay, I hope that's it. I hope you liked the video. Make sure to follow me on all the socials down below in the description. The link to the GPU folder will also be there. And see you next time.